I woke from anesthesia to the sound of a beeping heart monitor and a phone screen glowing with 14 missed calls from my neighbor, a woman who had more concern for my children than my own parents ever did. My name is Erica, I'm 34, and this happened 6 days ago. I had just come out of a routine surgical procedure, still foggy from the drugs. Still tasting that awful metallic bitterness at the back of my throat when I reached for my phone with a hand that felt heavy and uncoordinated, like it belonged to someone else entirely. The missed calls were all from the same person, my next-door neighbor, Ruth. I saw the text messages first because my fingers were trembling so badly I could barely manage to unlock the screen. The first one said my children were sitting on her front porch. The second one said my parents had left 2 hours earlier. 2 hours. My children had been alone for 2 hours while I lay unconscious in a recovery room, completely helpless, completely unaware that everything I thought I could count on was crumbling around me. I was still in a hospital gown, the thin fabric doing nothing to keep me warm, the taste of medicine thick and chemical on my tongue, when I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and unconcerned, as if she hadn't just abandoned her grandchildren, as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis. What she told me in the next few seconds severed the last thread of trust I had been clinging to for 30 years. By 9 o'clock that night, I had altered the locks on my doors, rewritten my emergency contacts, and redrafted my last will and testament. But to understand the full weight of that moment, I need to take you back to the morning of the surgery. Back to the last time I believed in the people who raised me. It was a Tuesday, and the sun was just starting to climb over the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of pale pink and gold as I pulled into my parents' driveway. I'm a nurse, so I'm used to chaos, used to organizing everything into neat little folders so nothing falls through the cracks. My husband, Michael, was out of state for a work conference, a trip we'd planned months ago, and he had offered to cancel it at least 3 times. But I told him to go. I told him I had everything handled. I always had everything handled. That was my role. We have 2 kids, a boy named Leo who is 8, and a girl named Mia who is 5. They are my entire world, the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I push through the exhaustion and the long shifts and the constant demands of a life that never seems to slow down. I'm the person in my extended family who manages everything. Need a ride to the airport? A dog sitter? A hand organizing a reunion? Call Erica. Need someone to drop everything and rush over because a pipe burst or a car broke down? Call Erica. I handle it. It's my identity, the thing I'm known for, the thing that makes me valuable. I learned a long time ago that asking for help was just a setup for disappointment, so I stopped asking. I planned instead. I made sure everything was in order, every contingency accounted for, because if I didn't, it wouldn't get done. And somewhere along the way, my family stopped seeing me as someone who needed anything at all. I became the person who gave, the person who showed up, the person who could always be counted on, and that meant I was never the one people counted for. This surgery was supposed to be minor. Just a few hours. A routine procedure that thousands of people undergo every single day without incident. I'd arranged for my parents to watch the kids from 7 in the morning until noon, a simple favor that I thought would be the easiest part of my day. I had packed the kids' bags, their clothes, their toothbrushes, Leo's favorite dinosaur book, Mia's beloved teddy bear that she's had since she was a baby and can't sleep without. I even wrote out a detailed schedule, their snack times and sleep routines, a list of allergies and emergency numbers and insurance cards, and placed it all in a neat manila folder that I brought into my parents' house. My father, a quiet, retired man who has spent his entire life avoiding conflict and enabling my mother's behavior, opened the door and took Leo's backpack without a word. He gave me a small nod, the kind of acknowledgement that's meant to convey understanding but never actually delivers. My mother was in the kitchen, already making coffee and humming to herself, the picture of domestic contentment. She took the folder from my hands and gave me a hug, her promise of "don't you worry about a thing" echoing in my ears like a lullaby I'd heard 1,000 times before. And I believed her. I always believed her. That was my mistake. My mother's phone buzzed on the granite counter. She glanced at it and put it face down, a casual movement I barely registered in the chaos of getting 2 children settled and making sure I had everything I needed for the hospital. I kissed Mia goodbye, peeling her small fingers from my leg one by one, and told her I'd be back before dinner. Her eyes, those enormous brown eyes that look exactly like Michael's, searched my face for something I couldn't quite name. She didn't cry, but she wanted to. I could always tell. The way her bottom lip tightened on the left side, the way her tiny hand gripped my shirt just a little too long. I should have listened to that feeling. I should have stayed. My mother's gaze flickered to her phone, then back to me. I remember thinking it was just a friend, perhaps a trivial message about nothing important. I didn't give it a second thought. But looking back, the way she put that phone down was too careful, too deliberate, almost like she was hiding something. It was as if she was concealing a plan that was already in motion, a secret that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. I got in my car and drove to the hospital, a route I know so well I could drive it in my sleep. I've made that drive 1,000 times in scrubs, but today I was in sweatpants, and I was the one checking in at admissions instead of swiping my badge at the staff entrance. The pre-op room was cold and bright, with a curtain that didn't quite pull closed and fluorescent lights that hummed a relentless, buzzing tune. A nurse I work with, someone I've shared breaks with and traded stories with for years, started my IV. She didn't miss a beat, sliding the needle in with practiced precision. I appreciated that more than she knew. Because the little things matter when you're about to lose consciousness and put your entire trust in strangers. I texted Michael, going in. "The kids are with Mom and Dad. Love you." 3 dots appeared, then his reply. "Love you. Call me when you're out. Tell your mom I said thanks." I set the phone on the side table, screen up, volume on, so I wouldn't miss anything. The anesthesiologist came in, a young guy with a calm voice and steady hands. He explained what he was going to do, walking me through the process like I'd never heard of propofol before. I let him do his job. People need their scripts, their routines, their carefully rehearsed reassurances. I lay back and stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles, counting 4 of them, trying to focus on something mundane to quiet the rising anxiety in my chest. The IV line was cold in my arm, a tiny river of ice flowing into my veins. My last thought before the anesthesia pulled me under was that my children were safe. They were with their grandparents. They were loved and protected, and exactly where they were supposed to be. I truly believed they were safe. 4 hours later, I would learn exactly what that safety was worth to them. When I surfaced, it was in fragments, pieces of reality assembling themselves slowly in my drug-addled brain. First the sound, the beeping monitors and distant coughing from another bay, the shuffle of footsteps in the hallway. Then, the blinding light. Too bright. The overhead fluorescence drilling through my eyelids like tiny needles. Then the pain, a dull, deep ache in my abdomen, like someone had parked a truck on my liver and left it there. The clock on the wall told me it was nearly 3 in the afternoon. I turned my head, my neck stiff and uncooperative, and saw my phone on the table. The screen was dark, a silent, accusing void. With clumsy fingers, I tapped the screen. 14 missed calls. All from my neighbor Ruth. My blood ran cold, colder than the IV drip, colder than the sterile hospital room. Ruth is a retired teacher in her late 60s, a woman who's watched my kids play in the sprinklers every summer since Leo could walk. She has 2 cats and a garden that puts mine to shame. And she doesn't call 14 times unless something is seriously wrong. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the phone, my thumbs sliding across the glass like they were trying to navigate a slick, icy surface. The first text was time-stamped from just after noon. Erica. Honey, your kids are at my house. Your parents left. Call me when you can. The second one, a few minutes later, said, Erica, please call me. Leo is upset. The third one, sent at 11:15, said, I'm getting worried. The kids are fine, but please call me. I don't know what's going on. The room started to tilt, not from the anesthesia, but from a rising sense of terror that gripped my chest and squeezed. I pressed the call button and Ruth answered immediately, like she had been waiting by the phone. Her voice was controlled, the voice of a woman who spent 30 years managing classrooms full of 8-year-olds, but I could hear the worry beneath the surface, the tightness in her words. She told me she had been trimming her hedges by the driveway and saw my parents' car pull out of their house around 11:30. She thought they were just running an errand, maybe grabbing groceries or picking up lunch, but then she saw the kids sitting alone on the front porch. Mia was crying. Leo had his arm around her, trying to comfort her, trying to be brave. Ruth said she went right over, and Leo told her that Grandpa said they would be back in an hour. That was hours ago. Ruth said she brought them inside, and Leo, my 8-year-old, had made his sister a peanut butter sandwich. A child making lunch for another child because the adults who were supposed to be there had vanished, had simply driven away and left them behind. They'd been sitting there for over 3 hours in the May heat, 3 hours of confusion and fear and waiting. I managed to thank her, my voice cracking, and she assured me the kids were fine and that I should take my time. She said they were safe with her, and I believed her because she had already proven herself more trustworthy than my own parents. I hung up. Then I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful and light, like she was having the best day of her life. Hi, sweetheart. How did it go? I asked her where my children were. There was a pause, just a beat, but I heard it. That pause is the sound of my mother calculating, rearranging reality to fit her narrative, deciding which version of the truth will serve her best. She told me not to worry, that the kids were sleeping, and that my father had checked on them before they left. Then she explained, with an air of casual annoyance, that my sister had a last-minute hair appointment and she needed to take her. Your father checked on them before we left, she said, as if that made everything acceptable, as if checking on them once absolved her of all responsibility. I told her the kids were not sleeping. They were on the porch. Mia was crying. There was another pause, shorter this time, while she recalibrated her story, scrambled to find a justification that would hold water. And then, she said it, a sentence that would sit in my chest like a piece of broken glass for the rest of my life. Your sister needed us more. She had a hair appointment. My sister needed her for a hair appointment. I said nothing for what felt like an eternity, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, counting them again, trying to find something solid to hold on to. The heart monitor beeped steadily. The IV drip ticked. Then I said, "Don't come to my house. Don't call my children." I hung up before she could answer, and I set the phone face down on the bed, just as she had done that morning when my sister's text came in. I lay there and ran the math. Not the medical kind. The other kind. The lifetime kind. When I was 11, I built a model of the solar system for the science fair. I spent weeks on it, painting the planets, measuring the distances, making sure everything was perfect. I won a ribbon. My parents weren't there. My sister had a dance performance across town, and they chose to watch her instead. "We'll see yours next year, honey," my mother said. But there was no next year because I stopped entering. I stopped trying to make them proud. When I was 17, I got a scholarship to a state college, a partial scholarship that required years of pharmacy work to cover the gap. My mother's reaction was a lukewarm, "That's nice." My sister had just been accepted to an expensive art program, and my mother couldn't stop talking about it. When I graduated with my nursing degree, my parents arrived 40 minutes late, and my sister wasn't even there. She had a headache. The memory of my wedding is a photograph of me and Michael, flanked by empty chairs where my parents should have been sitting. My sister's engagement party, however, was a massive, lavish affair that my parents spent a small fortune on. It was at a rented country club with a live band and an ice sculpture. 200 guests, a jazz quartet, a custom ice sculpture shaped like swans. My wedding, in contrast, was a small courthouse ceremony with a backyard barbecue. My mother complained about the heat and left early to take my sister somewhere. She gave me a card that said, "Proud of you always." No check, no gift, just the card. I had never asked for a party. I never asked for money. I just wanted them to be present. I wanted them to stay until the fireflies came out. That was it. That was all I ever wanted. I had spent my entire life being the person who didn't need anything, not because I didn't need, but because no one ever asked. The pattern is old, and I'd learned to live with it, to file it away under "that's just how they are." I'd built up scar tissue. But when that pattern reaches your children, the scar tissue tears. Just a few months before the surgery, Leo had his first school play. He was the narrator. He had 12 lines, and he practiced in the bathroom mirror every night for 3 weeks, holding a wooden spoon as a microphone. I called my mother, and she said of course she would be there. She always said yes. Saying yes costs nothing. Following through is the expensive part. But on the night of the play, I got a text. "Sorry, honey, Amber needs a ride to her therapist. Traffic is bad. Give Leo a hug from Grandma." I watched my son search the audience for her 3 times during his performance. 3 times. I smiled, big and steady, so he wouldn't feel the absence. Then, there was Mia's 5th birthday party. My mother came and brought my sister, who spent the entire time scrolling through her phone, laughing at something that made her happy while 5-year-olds played musical chairs behind her. She didn't bring a gift. She didn't even look up. The hospital released me at 5 in the evening. Strict instructions: no lifting over 10 pounds for 2 weeks, no driving for 24 hours, rest, fluids, follow-up in 10 days. I drove myself home. I ignored the discharge nurse's advice. I lied and said my neighbor was picking me up. There was nobody else to call. Not today. When I pulled into my driveway, Ruth was already walking across the lawn with the kids, moving slowly, deliberately, like she was carrying something fragile and precious. Mia saw me and ran, slamming into my legs, and the pain from the incision shot through me like lightning, but I didn't let go. I couldn't let go. Leo walked up more slowly, his small face serious. He didn't run. He was 7 and he had already learned to be careful. I held Mia's hand the whole time, he said, his voice steady and proud. I knelt down, the pain extraordinary, and wrapped my arms around both of them. Ruth watched from the edge of the driveway, not coming closer. She knew this moment was ours. When I finally stood, she said, "You have good kids, Erica. Whatever you decide, they are good kids." Then Mia tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, Grandma said Aunt Amber needed her more." She was 5 years old, and she had heard that sentence and repeated it to me because it confused her. It confused me too. That evening, the kids were in the bath, the sounds of splashing and giggling filling the house like nothing had changed. I sat on the closed toilet lid, my body aching, and watched them play. Watched Leo stack foam letters on the tile wall while Mia blew bubbles at him. Michael called from his hotel in Denver. I could hear the muffled hum of the conference center in the background. I told him everything in a flat voice, the same way I chart patient vitals, facts only, no editorializing, no emotion, just the data points of my mother's betrayal. Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Our kids were alone on a porch." "I know. Mia is 5. I know." He said he would book the first flight home. I told him not to, that I had it handled. He didn't argue. He knows me well enough to recognize when I'm not asking for permission. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I looked at the kitchen table through the bathroom doorway. The manila folder was right where I'd left it that morning, all the emergency numbers and schedules neatly inside, completely useless because the people I gave it to had chosen iced lattes over my children's safety. "Everything," I said. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened my laptop and began to dismantle my family structure. I started with the locks. A simple search, a phone call, and a locksmith named Dale was scheduled for the next morning. I added a note to the folder, 1, locks. I then accessed the school portal to update the emergency contact list, removing my parents' names and adding Ruth. Next, I drafted a list of documents to change. The will, the power of attorney, the life insurance, the medical directive. 6 items. 6 walls between my parents and my children. Each one was a simple form, a signature, a phone call, just quiet, determined paperwork, the kind of work that nobody notices until they try to open a door and realize the key doesn't fit anymore. I closed the laptop and went to bed, sleeping through the night for the first time in months. No dreams, no worrying about who I forgot to call back, just the dark. The next morning, Dale arrived with his van and replaced the deadbolts. He gave me 3 new, heavy brass keys. They felt different in my hand, thicker, sharper, like they meant something more than just metal. I paid him in cash. I gave 1 key to Ruth, kept 1 for myself, and planned to mail the 3rd to Michael. I did not make a copy for my parents. The first item on my list was crossed off, 1 down, 5 to go. I went to the elementary school. The secretary, Mrs. Jones, pulled out the pickup form. I took the pen and drew a single, clean line through my parents' names. Underneath them, I wrote, Ruth, neighbor and emergency guardian. She watched me with a knowing look, the kind you only get from someone who's seen this story play out many times before. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded. I also filled out the emergency medical authorization form, removing my parents and adding Michael's sister in Charlotte. As of that moment, my parents could no longer pick up my children, authorize their medical treatment, or be called in an emergency. As far as Ridgeview Elementary was concerned, Diane and Ray Walsh no longer existed. Item 2. Done. I then went to our lawyer. Sandra is a calm, silver-haired woman who's known me for years. She keeps a candy bowl on her desk and still sends handwritten notes to clients on their birthdays. I sat across from her desk and explained I needed to remove my parents from everything. She didn't flinch. She pulled up the files. She typed. I signed where she told me to sign. In the time it takes to eat lunch, I had unwritten my parents from my children's future. The power of attorney, the medical directive, the guardianship nomination. All of it. Item 3. Done. On Saturday, I called the life insurance company. I sat on hold for nearly half an hour listening to terrible saxophone music before I spoke to an agent named Kevin. I asked to change my contingent beneficiary. Can I ask who you are replacing? He asked cautiously. My mother, I said, and who would you like to put in her place? My sister-in-law, I replied. He processed the change without a word. When I hung up, I picked up my pen and crossed off the last item on the list. All 6 were done. I closed the folder, pressing my palms flat on the cool kitchen table. A lifetime of asking nothing from my family, and this is what it took for me to start asking everything of myself. My mother's calls began to come in waves. The first one was cheerful, casual, like she was just checking in. The second was concerned, probing, trying to figure out why I wasn't answering. By the third, she was angry, her voice sharp and accusing. This is ridiculous, she said. I don't know what you think happened, but this silent treatment is childish. My father sent a text. Just 6 words. Your mother is upset. Call her. My sister sent a message telling me I was being dramatic. It was just a few hours, she wrote. Can you please just call her back? I read every message. I recognized the pattern. My mother wasn't worried about me or my children. She was worried about the narrative. Diane's story of herself requires a daughter who forgives and moves on, who absorbs and forgets, a daughter who doesn't change the locks. I was ruining her story, and I was fine with that. I didn't respond to any of them. The following Sunday, I knew they would come. It was a ritual. My mother couldn't let a problem exist without trying to force it back into the shape she preferred. Sunday dinner had been our tradition for years, and she expected it would smooth this over the way it had smoothed over everything else. A pot roast and a table prayer, and we all pretend nothing happened. I heard the familiar rumble of her Camry in the driveway. My father's car pulled in behind her, and then my sister's red sedan. I watched from the kitchen window as my mother got out, carrying a glass baking dish. The smell of rosemary and garlic drifted through the screen. She walked up to the front door and reached into her purse for her key. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She just assumed the door would open for her, the way it always had. I was already standing in the hallway, the manila folder in my hand. I heard the key slide into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again, jiggling it, twisting it. Nothing. My father came up the steps and tried the key himself, giving the doorknob a frustrated shake. The doorbell chimed. I opened the door. I was standing straight, hair pulled back, the folder pressed against my chest. My mother's face lit up with a practiced smile. She held up the baking dish. We brought pot roast, honey. I made extra gravy the way you like it. I met her gaze. The key doesn't work anymore. Her smile vanished. My father steadied the dish as it tilted in her hands. What do you mean? She demanded. I had the locks changed on Wednesday, I said. She blinked, trying to process what I was telling her. She tried to push past, to get inside. Can we just come in and talk about this? She asked, her voice strained. No, I said. It was one word, but it was the most powerful sentence I had ever spoken. I opened the folder. This is the school pickup form, I said, holding up the first page. Your names have been removed, effective last Thursday. I watched the color drain from her cheeks in real time, like someone had opened a valve. And this is the updated will, I continued, pulling out the next document. You are no longer the named guardian for Leo and Mia. Claire Walsh in Charlotte has been named. I held up the confirmation for the life insurance change and the updated medical directive. And these documents make it clear that you are not authorized to make decisions for my children. If something happens to me, you are not the one who will be called. I closed the folder, my voice steady, my hands still. You chose a hair appointment over my surgery. You left my children on a porch. These aren't threats. They are changes I have already made. My mother's composure cracked. This is insane. She shouted. Her voice jumped an octave. I am your mother. I have given you everything. Everything I have. Everything. I pulled out my phone and held up the screenshot, the selfie of her and my sister at the cafe. 2 iced lattes, a marble table, sunlight streaming through a window. You posted this at 1:30, I said. I was in recovery, alone, with 14 missed calls from the neighbor who took care of my children because you wouldn't. She stared at the phone, her mouth opening and closing. My father stepped in, his negotiation voice, the one that smooths things over without addressing the real problem. Blood is blood, he said. You don't throw family away over a misunderstanding. I looked him in the eye. A misunderstanding? Leo made his sister a peanut butter sandwich. He is 8. He shouldn't have to do that. My sister pushed past them both. You are ruining this family over one afternoon. She yelled. I looked at her. The golden child, the one who always got the ride, the party, the heart emojis. You needed her for a hair appointment, I said. I needed her for surgery. And she chose you. I paused, letting the words sink in. Just then, I saw a shadow move next door. Ruth had stepped out onto her porch. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, a silent witness. My mother saw her and her voice dropped to a hiss. Can we at least come inside and talk about this? She pleaded. No, I said again. And then I looked past her, through the doorway to my kitchen. Leo was sitting at the table, drawing a picture of a house. A square with a triangle roof, the way kids draw them. He had drawn 4 stick figures inside, and 1 figure standing off to the side, far from the door. He had written a word next to it, in careful, crooked letters. Grandma. My mother saw the drawing. Her face crumbled. For one brief, real second, she looked like a person who understood exactly what she was losing. Then the second passed. Her chin lifted, the mask sliding back on. You'll regret this, she said, when you need me. And you will need me. I won't be there. I looked at her, this woman who had missed my science fair, left my wedding early, and chosen a salon over my surgery. You weren't there on Tuesday, I said. I stepped back and closed the door. The new lock clicked. Brass on brass. Clean and final. Through the door, I heard my sister say, "Mom, let's go." 3 sets of feet walked back down the walkway. 3 car doors closed. The engine started. The car backed out of the driveway and faded into the distance. I leaned my back against the door, the manila folder still pressed to my chest, my heart pounding. Leo's voice came from the kitchen. "Mommy, is Grandma coming in?" "Not today, baby," I said. Michael appeared from the hallway where he'd been listening. He had been there the whole time, ready if I needed him, staying back because I asked. He walked over and took the folder from my hands, placing it on the side table next to the new keys. He wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on the top of my head. He smelled like laundry detergent and coffee. He didn't ask if I was okay. He said, "You are incredible." I pressed my forehead against his chest. I was terrified. I whispered. "Same thing," he said. We stood like that, 2 people holding each other, while a 5-year-old in rain boots came around the corner and asked if we were still having dinner. We laughed, small and tired and real. "No pot roast tonight, baby," I said. "How about grilled cheese?" "With tomato soup," she said. We made grilled cheese sandwiches. Michael heated the soup. Leo set the table. 4 plates. 4 napkins. 4 glasses of water. No extras. No place setting for someone who might cancel. Someone who might show up late or leave early or not come at all. For the first time in my life, I set a table and didn't wonder who was going to disappoint me. 4 plates. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, my mother didn't call. My father sent 1 text telling me she wasn't eating. I ignored it. I unfollowed my sister on social media to escape her passive-aggressive quotes about family forgiving and life being too short for grudges. Michael registered himself as the primary contact on every school form and installed a Ring doorbell. Not because I think my parents are dangerous, but because I know desperate people don't always knock. I went back to work. My boss asked how I was feeling. I said lighter. She didn't ask what I meant, but she smiled like she knew. Leo stopped asking about his grandmother after the first week. He adapted. He filled the space with Legos and soccer and a chapter book about a dog who solves mysteries. Mia still mentions her sometimes, not every day, but occasionally before bed. "Mommy, when is Grandma coming back?" she asks. I sit on the edge of her bed, push her hair behind her ear, and explain that Grandma made a choice that wasn't safe for her, and that my job is to keep her safe. That is the most important job I have. She nods, hugs her teddy bear, and closes her eyes. I don't know if I will ever speak to my mother again. I don't know if my sister will ever understand what she cost all of us. I don't need to know today. Today, my locks work. My will is right. My children are asleep. The hardest thing is staying. The easiest is finally letting go. My scars are healing. And the table is set for 4. Some people will tell you that cutting off family is the hardest thing you will ever do. They are wrong. The hardest thing is staying. The hardest thing is smiling through 32 years of being the person nobody worries about because you trained them not to. The hardest thing is handing your children to people who have never once put you first and believing each time that maybe this time will be different. Leaving was the first easy decision I ever made. It just took 32 years to earn it. That is my story. 4 days, 6 documents, 1 door that does not open with the old key anymore. If this reminded you to check who is on your child's pickup list, do it today. If this resonated with you, please give this video a like and leave a comment. I love hearing where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to the Winds of Thought for more stories that make you think. I'll see you in the next one.